afternoon and welcome to NASA. I'm Tracy Dyson. I'm an active NASA astronaut and I've been to space 2 times. I've spent about 6 months living in space between the shuttle, the Soyuz, and the International Space Station. And I've also done a few spacewalks. But today, I'm your host and moderator for this fantastic event. And I hope that you'll all enjoy yourselves and start thinking of a lot of questions. Now, I want to welcome all of you here, especially the students that we have today in the auditorium, as well as those that are tuning in across the country, to this fantastic event where we're going to all learn a little bit more about the future of space. Now, it's our intent and our great hope that each one of you here will find your place in space. And as if that topic wasn't exciting enough, today you're going to hear from some very exceptional people, from our top NASA leaders to our early career folks across the agency. And so I want you to start thinking now about your questions, both here in the audience and online using the hashtag AskNASA. So without further ado, please let me introduce to you our powerhouse panel that we have today. Now, it is an honor for me to be here with them, as well as to introduce them. We're going to start here with the top dog, our NASA administrator, Jim Bridenstine.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Now, he's a relatively fresh face here at NASA. He just celebrated his first year anniversary as our administrator just last week.
That's right.
He has served in our country as a military pilot as well as a member of Congress. And in the short period of time that he has been here, he has been a locomotive force setting NASA on rails to the moon, Mars, and beyond. And he's teamed up with our President and Vice President of the United States to set challenging yet achievable goals for our future in space. Thanks for being here, Jim.
Thank you.
Next to Jim, we have Bill Gerstemeyer. He is our Associate Administrator for the Human Exploration and Operations Directorate. And Bill has been a part of NASA for decades. He has had his hand on the helm of the development of several NASA programs, starting in the early development of the shuttle, through the space station even before it was international, and on through being a key visionary and champion for our return to the moon and all things involved in that. And we are just so blessed to have him here, a part of NASA, and with us today. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks.
And lastly, and certainly not least, someone else who's devoted a career to NASA and led several organizations within is our Deputy Associate Administrator for Exploration in the Science Mission Directorate, Steve Clark. I think, truth be told, I think he's the guy with the intel and the detail about STEM and exploration. So have your questions ready for him. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our administrator, Jim.
Thank you, Tracy. It's great to be here. I loved the opening video. It was fantastic. I'll just kind of re-emphasize some of the important points in the video. The president has given us a new direction. He said he wants to go to the moon. It comes in what's called Space Policy Directive 1, signed by the President of the United States. He says he wants to go to the moon in a way that's never been done before. So I don't like to talk about going back to the moon. I like to talk about going forward to the moon. So when we go forward to the moon, what does that mean? In Space Policy Directive 1, it says this time when we go, we're going to stay. The word is sustainable. He wants to see a sustainable return to the moon. That means we're going to utilize our international partners, but also our commercial partners. Another interesting point in Space Policy Directive 1 is that for the first time in American policy, it is our policy to now utilize the resources of the moon in order to live and work on another world. What does that mean? Based on NASA discoveries back in 2009, we now know that there's hundreds of millions of tons of water ice on the surface of the moon. Water ice represents life support. It's water to breathe. It's water to drink. It's air to breathe. But it's also rocket fuel. Hydrogen and oxygen, when put into cryogenic form, is the same rocket fuel that powered the space shuttles. It's the same rocket fuel that will power the Space Launch System, the largest rocket ever built that is now under development. And so there's a lot of opportunity here. But the question is, why do we go to the moon? Like, we've been there. I hear that quite frequently. Well, we go there because we need to learn how to live and work on another world. When we go to Mars, you know, the Earth and Mars are only on the same side of the sun once every 26 months. That means when we go to Mars, we have to be ready to stay. We have to learn how to live and work on another world, and it just so happens that the moon is a 3-day journey home. That means we can get there. It's always with the Earth. Wherever we go around the sun, it's always with us. We can get there and we can get home. We can take additional risk, as a matter of fact. We have learned from the Apollo program Gerst was a mid-career guy during the Apollo program. I kid Bill.
Thanks. Thanks, Jim.
Well, she said how much experience you have. And we all have
I meant it in a good way.
it. But here's the thing. During the Apollo program, Apollo 13 taught us something very important, which is something can go wrong and you can come home safely. If something like that were to happen on the way to Mars, we would be in big trouble. Our astronauts would not have made it home alive. What does that mean? The moon is a proving ground. It is the place where we can go, live, and work for a sustained period of time. People like Tracy can go and stay, live, and work, and then become those first explorers to go to Mars. So this was all in the President's Space Policy Directive 1. Recently, we had a new direction given by the President, announced by the Vice President at the National Space Council, and that new direction is that not only are we going to go back to the moon, I should say forward to the moon, in other words, to stay, not only are we going to do that, but our first humans are going to land on the moon in the year 2024. And they have a target destination, the South Pole of the moon, which is where the preponderance of the water ice is. And another announcement was that the Vice President said very clearly that the first woman and the next man on the surface of the moon will be Americans. And I am here to tell you that I believe it is well within the realm of possibility that the first woman on the South Pole of the moon will get there in the year 2024 because of the great work that Bill and Steve are doing here at NASA. So we have a lot to look forward to. I'm looking forward to the discussion. Tracy, thank you for hosting this.
Pleasure.
And this is going to be, I think, a great dialogue with young folks all across the country to discuss ultimately what it's going to take to accomplish the end states that we all believe in.
Excellent.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm pretty excited. I don't know about the rest of you. So in light of the Vice President's proposal, Bill, Steve, what do you think NASA's biggest challenge will be in the next 5 years?
Again, I think the cool thing that Jim talked about is we're going forward to the moon. So we're going in a sustainable way. And Jim talked a little bit about the risk and the dangers, right? This is not an easy business. And I think that's the cool thing about human spaceflight is it can't be any one of us. We have to really work as a huge team. So it's got to be an international team, teaming with partnerships, and then also teaming with the next generation and bringing on the next generation of engineers and scientists and researchers and developers and technicians. This has got to be one huge effort to move forward, and we got to move with urgency. We don't have a lot of time between now and 2024 to debate and decide exactly and precisely the right way. We need to really share openly with each other. We need to get ready to move forward. We need to build the hardware, bring the right teams of people together, empower them with decisions to move and go forward. So I look at this as a great time. This is a unique challenge. You know, in your career, you maybe get a chance, at least in my lifetime, to see one major development. You're getting a chance to be in the ground floor of a major development that's going forward to the moon. So there is no better time in your career than to be right at the beginning, to get teamed together. All those skills you learned of working with each other in class, working internationally, you got to put all those to the next level, and you got to help us move forward to the moon. So that's the challenge we face, but we can do it only if we do it as an entire team.
Excellent. I think you guys are up for that challenge, huh?
No
Steve.
pressure.
No pressure.
No pressure. Steve.
So I'll pull on what Bill just said. I think we have a fantastic challenge that has been given to us to make it forward to the moon in 2024. And you know, when I was your age, I always dreamed of working in the space program. And I always looked for that next opportunity of when we would return to the moon. Because I'll age myself here. I did watch the Apollo moon landings. I would watch it on black and white TV. I'm really aging myself now, right, Bill? My parents would let me stay up all hours of the night to watch, and I was just glued to that TV. And I said, yep, that's what I want to do. I want to be involved with the space program. I thought we were going to stay there after the Apollo missions, but of course things changed. I've been involved with some efforts that we've started before to try to return to the moon, and for various reasons, you know, we had to switch directions. But this time's really different, and like Bill said, we're going to have to do this as a team, particularly in this time frame. And when we say team, it's not just NASA, but it's our commercial and international partners. And what feels and what I really think is different with this approach now is industry has matured to the point, technology, science, and so forth, and they are geared and set to partner with us to do this together. And we're going to leverage the strengths of industry, academia, within our NASA workforce to do this together, and with our international partners as well. So everybody is on board with this. We've had discussions over the last couple weeks at various forums with our industry partners, commercial partners, academia, and international, and everybody is on board and excited about this effort to return to the moon. So you are in probably the best time of your lives to be positioning yourselves for the long-term strategy that we're putting in place now. So we're excited to be bringing on new folks, put new blood in the pipeline to help us come up with new innovative ideas to make a sustained presence on the moon and onto Mars and beyond.
Well said, guys. You guys should all just feel, if not very excited, very grateful. This is just a sample of our NASA leadership that has put in place a platform for all of you to go on and to explore in space. And they're joking up here about how long they've been around this planet and in NASA, but it's because of that you guys have the opportunity to go off of this planet to other ones. And so I'm, for one, very grateful. So thanks, guys.
Awesome.
Now, we are going to, NASA here is going to show you some early career folks who have already started making a mark at NASA. And so throughout the show, we're going to show you some of the amazing work that they're doing to help us go forward to the moon. So to kick it off, we're going to watch Kelsey Young at the Goddard Space Flight Center.
Hi, my name is Kelsey Young, and I'm a planetary geologist at the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland. I'm a field geologist, which means that my office is basically the field. So I study terrestrial analog sites, so sites on Earth that look like sites on other planets. So I hike on volcanoes on Earth that look like volcanoes on the moon, and I explore impact craters on Earth that look like impact craters on Mars. Really what I'm trying to do is make sure that future human spaceflight includes science priorities. So when astronauts have boots on the ground on the moon and Mars, they're going to be doing science, collecting samples and making in situ measurements and deploying experiment packages. And what we're trying to do is design those instruments and those experiment packages to be really easy for astronauts to deploy. From the first time I heard the phrase planetary field geology, I was completely hooked. The idea of astronauts being on another planet, solving geologic problems, and interacting with the science community real time was just completely awe-inspiring to me. And the internship I had at NASA Johnson Space Center really enabled me to get where I am today at NASA and understand what it is about this job that I love so much. People of all STEM backgrounds are vitally important here at NASA, and we really do need people of an incredibly diverse set of backgrounds to make our agency's goals succeed. I think when you make your best advancements are when you're pushing yourself a little bit. So my best advice to potential interns coming into NASA is push your boundaries a little bit, because you never know where it could get you.
Well, that's pretty exciting. I just have to call her out. Kelsey Young is actually in the audience with us today. Kelsey, wave your hand for everyone. Exciting.
Hey.
Thank you for all your work. Okay, so we've been here for a little bit of time for all of you to start thinking about your questions. I believe that those tuning in social media have submitted theirs through the hashtag AskNASA, and it's time we're going to go to some of those questions now.
From Twitter user Victoria, what is the Science Mission Directorate playing in NASA's role to Moon to Mars?
Steve.
Wow, that's a big question. So the Science Mission Directorate has been exploring the moon and Mars for decades. So we're going to continue to do that, but now we're going to do it in tandem with our Human Exploration Mission Directorate partners. When we return to the moon with humans, we're going to be taking science along with those astronauts. In fact, we're really starting to develop what kind of science do we want to do when we return humans to the surface of the moon within the next 5 years. In parallel with that, we have started working with our commercial partners to begin robotic missions to the surface of the moon. And we're actually doing it in a very innovative way. We're actually buying services. NASA is going to buy a ride on commercial lunar landers to the surface. It's called the Commercial Lunar Payload Services. And in fact, we have gotten the first proposals in that we're reviewing right now, and we're looking to award that first delivery task order, as we call it, next month. So we're very excited about kicking off this new business venture with our commercial partners to buy a ride to the lunar surface. And we're going to take science instruments, we're going to take technology development payloads, we're going to demonstrate technologies that will help design the next human lander. And we're going to be doing a variety of science. We'll be going to the South Pole, we'll be going to all locations, even on the far side of the moon, with various instruments to study heliophysics, astrophysics, obviously planetary as well. And we're going to leverage a lot of what we learn there as we go back to Mars as well with humans. We've been exploring Mars, as you know, for decades now, and we're going to continue to do that as we start setting up for the first human exploration to Mars.
Excellent.
And there's some really cool things too with the fact that they're going to be able to go to all these different locations with these commercial landed payload services. They can kind of check out what the geology is like and what things are there. And then as the vignette shows, where there's a really complicated region where the robot can do so much, but it looks really, really difficult, and it could really have the advantage of getting a human there. With the gateway approach and going forward to the moon, we can target that specific location wherever it is on the moon and then bring a crew down to that location that science went first and said, hey, this is so complicated. We could really use those hands, eyes in there with the tools of geologists looking at this region to bring back the really cool samples. So this is a really nice tie between both of us, and it's a tie to the gateway that allows us to go anywhere on the moon. So we don't have to know today where that perfect spot is on the moon. We let the science guys help us figure out where those really interesting things are and where it's worthwhile and it's worth the risk of putting a human down there. Those are the places we'll go with humans. So this is a great, great way to move it forward.
So when we talk about, no kidding, bringing in the Science Mission Directorate and the Human Exploration and Operations Mission Directorate together, it's important to remember that what the President has tasked us to do is go to the moon sustainably. How do we define sustainably? Does that mean we're going to have a permanent human presence on the surface of the moon? Well, eventually, but not right away. Sustainably means that we have access with humans to any part of the moon anytime we need to get there. That's what we mean. But when we say sustainable, we also mean landers, rovers, robots, and humans all being able to live and work on the surface of the moon with either crewed or uncrewed the habitation around the moon. In other words, he mentioned the gateway. We're talking about a permanent presence of a space station in orbit around the moon that can either be crewed or uncrewed, from whence you can control the landers, the robots, and the rovers on the surface of the moon. So you're going to have more access to more parts of the moon than ever before, sometimes with humans at the gateway, sometimes without humans at the gateway. I call it a space station in orbit around the moon because that's what most people understand. But the reality is it's not the International Space Station. It's much smaller. It's focused specifically on activities on the surface of the moon. But it has the opportunity to expand over time. And it can become a ship over time that could, no kidding, go all the way to Mars. Now, the first gateway won't do that, but gateways in the future would. So what we're talking about with a sustainable return to the moon is using all of the elements of the Science Mission Directorate and all the elements of the Human Exploration and Operations Mission Directorate, using them together to ultimately achieve that end state. And the beginning of that end state starts when we put the first female on the south pole of the moon in 2024.
I tell you what, you guys need to get involved in NASA now so that as we begin to making our trip to the Mars, you guys would already have a lot of experience with what we're talking about, because what these guys are describing to you is going to the moon will be complex, and it will involve a lot of great minds coming together, not just here at NASA, but across the world and the globe. And we need you guys to start getting involved in it now so that we can have your great mind involved too. I think we have time for one more question.
From Twitter user Patricia, what will be NASA's biggest technical obstacle over the next year?
I think I'll leave that.
I was going to say, I'm looking at you, Gert.
I would say, again, I think just bringing some of these new big rockets online, you get to see the video at the very beginning, and you see all the hardware that's put together. But then to put all that hardware together and actually have it all go fly in an uncrewed mission in the late 20s, 2021, is going to be nothing. That's a huge challenge for us. I mean, it looks easy, but the engines are ready to go. Everything's been checked out. But the complexity and the engineering that goes into that for a human class, human rated system is not trivial and is not easy. And And it takes the best and the brightest to pull together to go make that stuff happen. So it looks great on view graphs. It all looks good when you put it together. You put your concept together. Then you start cutting metal for the first time. You start putting hardware together. It's a lot more difficult than it was ever envisioned. And I think that'll be our big challenge moving forward. But then also architect the system such it's sustainable, it's an open architecture, and it continue to advance and meet these goals. So it's not a one-off single design, and how do we actually put all that in place? So I think our biggest challenge is kind of pushing our designs and our hardware to the finish line and actually taking them to flight with crews.
Exactly. Do you have anything?
Well, I would just say the biggest technical challenge is important. But if you remember, the last time we had humans on the moon was 1972. That's a long time to not have humans on the moon. And I will tell you that we have that gap not because of the technical challenges. NASA knows how to retire the technical risk. We have that gap because of the political challenges. I mean, that's just the reality. So there have been efforts in the past to go back to the moon. We talk about the Space Exploration Initiative back in the 1990s, or the Vision for Space Exploration in the early 2000s. In each of those cases, I think everybody was confident NASA was up to the task. What ended up happening, though, were political challenges. Funding didn't materialize. Priorities changed. Administrations changed. And each of these introduce another risk, in this case, political risk. One of the things that I think is important and happening now, how do we retire political risk? Well, one thing you can do to retire political risk is to go faster. So instead of 2028 being the first landing date, this administration has said 2024. Why? Because we don't want to take the risk that over the course of time, priorities are going to change. We want to get it done, we want to get it there now, and we want to have a sustainable return to the moon that sustainably will happen in 2028, but we want to get people engaged by 2024 for this return to the moon. So the technical risk is important. NASA is more than capable, and our commercial and international partners are more than capable of retiring that risk. It's the political risk that has been the problem in the past.
And the goal is crystal clear. We want to be on the moon in 2024.
That's exactly right. When I say political risk, I also want to be clear. What we need is strong bipartisan support. This is not, and it never has been, a partisan thing. NASA has strong bipartisan support. We want to keep that strong bipartisan support. And that's what it takes ultimately to achieve this end state, which is an American end state.
It's more than just science. Cassandra Stevens is at the Marshall Space Flight Center, and she's our next early career individual that we're going to hear from. Let's hear what she has to say about her amazing work at NASA.
Hi, my name is Cassandra Stevens. I'm a Payload Communications Manager here at Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. As a Payload Communications Manager, or PACOM, for the International Space Station, we are a liaison between the crew and the ground. We speak directly to the crew, whether it be the astronauts or the cosmonauts, helping them through the various payload experiments they do on the station. The future exploration plan for NASA is that we want to go to Mars, right? But we're not just going to go straight from Earth to Mars. We have to test out our technologies and figure out how to live in space before we can actually go to Mars. I majored in aerospace engineering at Georgia Tech. That background has enabled me to not only be here at NASA, but it helped me learn how to think through a process. I did a one-semester internship, enjoyed it, and they liked me so much they brought me back as a Pathways intern, and that led to my full-time position as a trajectory analyst, and ultimately I was able to come over as a PACOM and do what I'm doing now. For those who are interested in pursuing a STEM education and really interested in joining us here at NASA, I would say don't give up. It may seem really hard as you're going through it, but if I can do it, you can do it.
All right, everybody, today we have a real treat here for you. It's the ISS crew on board the International Space Station, and they're live with us now and ready to take questions. I see Christina and Nick there. How you guys doing?
Hey Tracy, welcome on board. Great to be with you all.
It's great to be with you. Now, we've got a whole line of students here ready to ask you some questions. I hope you're ready.
We are absolutely ready, and we're looking forward to it.
So this is Jim Bridenstine. Nick, I liked you better when you were in the vampire pose.
No, wait a minute.
Easily fix that.
There we go. Well, I just want to say thank you guys for your great work up there on the International Space Station. It's an honor to be with you. Thank you for sharing your very valuable time with the students from all across America who are interested in STEM careers. And we look forward to hearing some of their questions and hearing your answers.
It's great to be with you, sir, and look forward to answering these questions. It's a great way to spend a few minutes out of our day reaching out to the next generation who are going to keep this mission going forward.
Awesome.
All right, we're ready for our first question.
Hi, my name is Caitlin Singham, and my question is, what is some advice that you can give to college students who are interested in pursuing a career in STEM?
Caitlin, that's a great question. In particular, I always tell everyone to pursue their passions, but if you've already figured out that STEM is one of your passions, then I think something that you can do to broaden those skills that you're acquiring in college is to focus on doing a lot of sort of extracurricular type activities within that realm. So if you're in mechanical engineering, go out and join a team at your college that's working on designing a race car or whatever things that your school does best, aerospace engineering projects. Group work is really important for developing not only the technical skills, but seeing how those are applied in a group environment, seeing about the engineering trades that have to be made when you're designing something complex, and really just going outside your comfort zone if you need to make sure that you're not just pencil to paper all the time, but that you're learning how those things are applied in the real world.
Great, thanks. My name's Anne Marie, and my question is, what are some of the core features of the space station that help keep your mental health in check?
Well, I've got to say my favorite mental health support that we have is the cupola. It's our window to look down on the world. It helps, I use it every day to look out and get that different perspective that we get up here, to fully appreciate the place that we're at, the unique perspective that we get from the laboratory up here. But it also is a way to connect with the ground. And, we spend 6+ months up here, upwards of a year, and it's important to stay connected with the ground, and that's one way that we can do it.
Go ahead with your next question.
Hi, my name's Aaliyah Chase, and my question is, outside of the complexities of travel, what is your greatest challenge for space science?
Aaliyah, thanks for that question. It's very insightful. I think that you mentioned the one challenge of travel and getting the experiments up here. But another challenge that we face that we constantly work on is communication about the status of different experiments. When we come up upon the inevitable, which are things that don't necessarily happen how we predicted, because one, we're in microgravity, and two, we're doing cutting edge science, we have to be able to communicate those things to the experts that are actually running the science experiments and that devise these experiments and that have a lot of knowledge about where they want to go with it. So in other words, sometimes we have to be agile and make adjustments on the fly. And our challenge is to communicate what we're seeing and to have the background knowledge to understand how what we're seeing might translate into a solution or the root cause of a different fault or some other things that might be happening. So I think that's a really unique challenge that we face, and I think it's also another reason to highlight communication as such an important skill that you can gain in college.
Hi, my name is Andrew Cornelio. What excites you the most as we go forward to the moon?
Andrew, I think that right now, space is a really exciting field to be a part of. And the idea of getting back to the moon in 5 years is exciting to me because of what it represents. All of the energy that's been put into the the space enterprise at this point, and the motivation and the energy and excitement that is building. For me, getting back to the moon is really exciting because that's where we're going to prove out all the technologies and the ways we're going to operate that are going to enable us to get to Mars. That's going to be our proving ground, and knowing that we're committed to trying to test all of those things out and develop the methods and the techniques and the technologies we're going to need to be successful at Mars, and we've got that energy now, it really gives me promise that we're going to get there to Mars.
Hello, everyone. My name is Zach Moseder, and my question for you guys is phrased as: astronaut training is incredibly detailed to prepare you for life on the space station. How much will training change to prepare astronauts to go to the moon and stay?
Zach, that's a great question. I think that one of the prime ways that we're going to have to adapt is not having exactly real-time communications. I think there's going to be a lot more autonomy. One, because hopefully the missions will be very long, and so astronauts will basically be in it for the long haul. They'll be the ones fixing things. And also, we may have to develop a different posture for repair of things when they break. We may have to develop a strategy where we're doing more invasive types of repair work rather than just having a lot of spares and switching out bigger units, which is kind of the philosophy that we have right now. So I think autonomy is a big one that will be teaching astronauts basically how to go deeper and to have a lot more systems knowledge on the things that they're working on. And of course, the other really big one is exploring the surface of the moon. So we may have more geology training and making sure that astronauts, when they do those EVAs and they do those geology work to collect both planetary science and lunar science, that we have those skills in hand so that we can kind of execute on the fly when we see things that are of scientific interest.
Hello, I'm Alejandro Jorge, and my question is, with the commercialization of space, do you see yourself working alongside commercial astronauts in the future?
Yeah, I sure hope so. Commercialization of space is going to open up space for a whole new group of people. And it doesn't need to be a small, exclusive club of people that have flown in space. The more, the merrier, as far as I'm concerned. And so I look forward to the day where we're mixing, government astronauts and commercial astronauts and astronauts from every country in the globe. The more that we can get in space, the more people we can get involved, the more successful we're going to be, because that's really where we draw our strength, is through collaboration, whether it's across industry or whether it's across the globe. We're always stronger when we're collaborating together.
Thank you. My name is Milan Chopra, and my question is, what can the space station do that labs on Earth can't?
Well, I think the biggest variable that we play with here in our laboratory that is orbiting the Earth is that of microgravity. You know, we like to say that this is the one laboratory that we've created where gravity is a variable, as Nick is demonstrating right now. You know, on Earth, obviously, everything in the natural world evolved in an environment that had gravity. So being able to determine which of the things about the natural world happened because of gravity and which are independent of those of gravity is something that we can offer here on board. Another really neat thing that microgravity offers is for studying physical processes. Physical processes in a 1G environment always kind of have that bias of gravity that takes out our ability to truly understand the fundamentals behind things that are going on, often at minute levels, things that become important as we kind of get into these industrial ages where those things on the very edges of what we're capable of doing really matter and really can make the difference between having that commercial edge. So those are the types of things that we mainly focus on here in a microgravity environment, and I think that's what makes this laboratory so unique.
We're really enjoying the answers, Nick and Christina. We have about 9 more minutes left and time for a couple more questions, so if you could hang with us.
My name is Julian Morris, and I wanted to know what career goals led you to pursue being an astronaut.
Well, for me, it was serving in the Air Force. That was the path that exposed me to aviation and the idea of testing really complex machines, complex aircraft, getting involved in designing and building spacecraft. And then that was a natural transition to wanting to get involved with the astronaut corps. But it's going to be different with everyone. And I think that in general, having a sense of adventure, being excited about going and exploring new places and discovering new things. I think that all of us, definitely in our class of astronauts when we were selected back in 2013, we had all gone to fairly extreme environments and extreme situations, and so we had practice in expeditionary type environments, and I think that we all enjoy working in that type of environment. The other thing I think that is really important is that you've got to be a team player. You've got to really enjoy and thrive working in teams, whether they're small teams or whether they're big teams. That's how we explore space as part of a team. It's not just the 6 of us up here on orbit, but it's the tens of thousands of people on the ground that are constantly helping us along the way. So teamwork and really wanting to get out there and discover new things.
Go ahead. I have another question.
Hello, my name is Alex Klein, and my question is, what do you think should be the focus of human spaceflight in both the near and long term?
You know, I think that NASA has a great vision for both of those sort of timescales. On the near term, we're looking at how we can best utilize the space station in the final, 5 to 10 years of its lifetime, and making sure that we always maintain a presence in space when that lifetime has expired. And for that, we're looking at going back to the moon and going there to stay. So that I see as the near-term goal. And then in the longer term, using that platform as a stepping stone for deeper space exploration and bringing humans to Mars. And I think one of the fundamental goals of a Mars mission is to look for life outside of the Earth. And I think that kind of driving goal to set the stage for both near-term and long-term goals of NASA is an exciting one. And I think it's the right one to drive the program.
Excellent. We have time for one more question.
Hello, my name is Jane Kelly, and my question is, what experiments are you currently working on?
So Nick handed me the microphone because I actually just finished up a really fun experiment working with the ground teams on something where we're looking to see if the microgravity environment is going to be a good one for producing fiber optics. We think that this environment could potentially produce fiber optics in a way that is beneficial in their quality and other things. And the neat thing about that is that their sort of weight to value ratio is very advantageous for spaceflight. So we're talking about being able to produce something here in space that doesn't take many resources to actually fly, but then back on the ground it has a very immense commercial value. So it's been exciting to be a part of something that spans that science and commercial aspect of the space station. And so that's what I've been working on today.
Pretty cool that you guys have time to even do experiments when you're busy keeping care of the space station. We know you've had a busy day already doing that, getting into the warning book and bringing the station back up to full power. So thank you so much for spending the time with us this morning and taking this casual moment to tell us about your thoughts. I'm going to pass it over to the administrator to wish you all well and say goodbye.
Well, Nick and Christina, we are very grateful for your time today. You are an inspiration to this country. Your whole country is very proud of you, and thank you for your service. And we'll look forward to catching up again soon.
Thank you, sir. We definitely enjoy it up here and are honored for the opportunity. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Say bye to Ann and David for us, too. All right, that was exciting, you guys. Next up, Paramitra Mitra is a former intern at the Marshall Space Flight Center, as well as now at Johnson Space Center, and I think she's found her place in space. So let's hear from her.
Hi everyone, my name is Paramita Mitra, and welcome to my workspace. I am a human interface engineer here at NASA Johnson Space Center, where I work specifically right now with spacesuit technologies. You are in the Human Integrated Vehicles and Environments, HIVE, and the WEAR Lab. And so here we develop a lot of quick and early prototyping for engineering hardware that the human needs to interact with. So the major project that I work on is the Exploration EMU, or the XEMU, and that is NASA's next generation spacesuit for lunar and Martian missions. In a spacewalk scenario, or an EVA, crew members are introduced to very difficult tasks. They often describe it as running a marathon and doing brain surgery at the same time. And so one of the things that we want to ensure for lunar and Martian missions is that the crew member is efficient and effective. Working at NASA doesn't mean just being an aerospace engineer. We encompass all different types of fields, specifically within STEM. There's a lot of components of my research that I've done in human performance where we have to understand the human psychology to be able to accommodate for it in a piece of technology. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in aerospace engineering from Mississippi State University. So what academia gives you is the ability to hone in on a problem and become passionate about something and then apply that to your career in the future. So as we're going forward to the moon and then to Mars, we're going to stay, and we need to be sustainable, and we need to have plenty of engineers who contribute to that common goal. Come find your place in space.
All right, I think now we're going to hit some more questions. I think we'll start off with social media. Hashtag Ask NASA.
Definitely. From Twitter, we have a question. How do you open your programs to non-engineering and non-aerospace college students interested in helping NASA reach its goals?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I will tell you, as somebody, I had 3 majors at Rice University. None of them were engineering. I majored in economics, business, and psychology. It's interesting, I actually took a job to be a cost accountant out of college, if you can imagine that. And then I had the opportunity to go fly in the United States Navy, at which point I immediately dropped my job offer and joined the United States Navy to be a pilot. So I will tell you that there's certainly not one way to come to NASA. If you would have asked me back then if I would be the NASA administrator, I would have told you no way. But I will tell you that there's a lot of different paths to take. We need accountants. I mean, the reality is we need accountants. We need psychologists. We need people that have business backgrounds and, in fact, economics backgrounds. You heard a lot today. Our astronauts were talking about the commercialization of space. Well, what does that mean and how do we achieve it? She was, in fact, talking about fiber optics, the idea, how do you create a market in low Earth orbit that is not dependent on NASA? Well, fiber optics is one piece of that market. The idea that you can create materials in space that are so crystal clear that you don't have to have repeaters every couple of miles drives down the cost for fiber optics on Earth. So whether it's material science, whether it's pharmaceuticals, whether it's, right now we've got experiments on the International Space Station where we're working to print in 3D human organs using adult stem cells. So these are technologies and capabilities that are going to be transformative for humankind. And not all of it has to do with being a scientist or an engineer, but a lot of it is going to be what are the best business models? How do How do we finance these activities for the commercialization of low Earth orbit? So there is no shortage of opportunity for folks that want to get involved in space, even if you're not an engineer or a scientist.
I guess you could say there's a place for everyone in space.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's the message. Well, I just want to reiterate to everyone here that you have got a powerhouse panel up here of folks, and I hope that you have questions for them, because this is a rare opportunity that we have to tap in to their experience and also their vision. And so do we have any questions here in the audience? All right, we have the mic coming down.
Hi, my name is Caitlin Singham. It's me again. My question is, how does NASA plan on balancing its goal of long-term human missions to the moon and other planets in the near future with the ethical responsibility of preserving the physical and biological integrity of those planets for future generations as shared natural resources?
Well, I think I can take that. We're actively working what we call planetary protection. And I don't mean by the defense of Earth. I'm talking about protecting the environment that we're going to, and also when we bring samples back, protecting the environment here on Earth as well. So we have been actively working that for a long time for Mars sample return, which we hope to do in 2026. But we're now looking also at bringing additional lunar samples back. And we have a finite number of samples from the Apollo missions. In fact, we're going to be opening a pristine sample here early next year from one of the late Apollo missions. And we're looking forward to bringing new samples back, both by the humans and by robotics. So we're working through those processes. We're refining the processes we already have in place. We have a curation facility at the Johnson Space Center where we've been examining the Apollo samples for years. And now we're actually going through and revising those processes to find better ways to protect both the environment here and protect the environment where we gather the samples as well. Robotically, we've been doing that for years, particularly for the Mars missions. We'll continue to revise those processes as we explore even beyond Mars onto the other planets as well.
Excellent.
Can I say a few words
of course you can.
On this? A couple of things. Because of the value that the Science Mission Directorate has provided, there's a number of things that we now know. Many in this room might be familiar with Spirit and Opportunity. These are two rovers that have come to the end of their lives, but they're still on Mars. They're not alive anymore. But from these two little rovers, we now know that Mars in its northern hemisphere was 2/3 covered in ocean in its northern hemisphere. It had a strong magnetosphere that protected it from the radiation of deep space. Mars had a thick atmosphere. In other words, Mars was habitable at one point in its history. And I'm not saying it was inhabited. I don't know. Neither does anybody else. But it was habitable at one point. The other thing that's important to note is because of Curiosity, which is still on Mars and still doing great work on Mars, just in the last year since I've been the NASA administrator, we have discovered complex organic compounds on the surface of Mars. What does that mean? The building blocks for life exist on Mars. They don't exist at all on the moon, zero, but they exist in mass quantities on Mars. And of course, they're all over the Earth, as you in this room are aware. We also know that the methane cycles on Mars are perfectly commensurate with the seasons of Mars. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that there's life on Mars. We don't know. But the probability keeps going up because of these discoveries from the Science Mission Directorate. We also know that there's liquid water 12 kilometers under the surface of Mars. The probability for finding life just went up again. What do we know about liquid water on Earth? Wherever it exists, there's life when it comes to liquid water on Earth. So the question is there life on Mars? Again, I don't know, but we need to find out. To the question that you asked, here's the key thing that we have to do. We are going to do these missions to Mars, and if life is there, we will discover it. We have to make very sure that the life that is discovered on Mars, should it exist, is life that was there, not brought by us. So if we are bringing microbes to Mars because we're doing all of these missions, and then we later discover microbes on Mars, the question is, did we put them there, or are they natural? And so that's why planetary protection is important. It's also important to note that if we're going to send humans anywhere, we are going to leave microbes. That we are very dirty beings. And when we go to Mars, Mars will become dirty as well. So we have to be really careful about how we do these things. But know this, NASA is committed to finding the right balance to make sure that we have the right balance of planetary protection and the ability to explore.
That was a great question, and it appears that we've put a lot of thought into it on our side, so it's a real comfort. We got another question here in the audience.
Okay. Hello, my name is Samari Williams, and stemming from that question, I've read many articles that are talking about commercial uses like for the moon, like going there to live or to have work or even to study. So can you please like elaborate a little bit on like the workings of actually making the moon or the Mars like their home?
Sure. So one of the things that we think is important, and we're doing this in low Earth orbit right now, is commercializing. So in order to have people living and working in low Earth orbit permanently, NASA can't be the only customer for those activities. So what are the other customers? We talked about pharmaceuticals. We talked about printing organs. We talked about the material sciences, those kind of things that we can look to the future and say there's a market there for human activity in low Earth orbit. There's also another market there. The other market would be tourism. People want to go to space for the fun of going to space. Tracy might be in that category. I'm not sure. But I think there are markets out there for low Earth orbit. The next question is, what are the markets for the moon? And I think what we'll find is that we don't know yet, but there are markets there. The key is this, to make it sustainable for the long term. NASA needs to be one customer of many customers. If we can achieve that, one customer of many customers, the cost goes down, access goes up. The other thing that's important is that we have numerous providers that are competing on cost and innovation. If we have numerous providers competing, again, cost goes down, access goes up. So there's two things here, one customer of many customers, and we need to have numerous providers competing on cost and innovation. And if we can achieve that, then it's long-term sustainable. We talked about the water ice on the moon. Air to breathe, water to drink, rocket fuel. Here's what else we know. The moon has all kinds of pot marks, and each one of those pot marks is an asteroid impact from deep space. We talk about rare earth metals. Rare earth metals are not earth metals. They're asteroid impacts from billions of years ago. The thing about the Earth is we have this very active geology. We have an active hydrosphere, an active atmosphere, and anything that impacted the Earth billions of years ago is not where it was billions of years ago because of this active environment in which we live. But on the moon, there isn't an active geology. There's not an active hydrosphere. There's not an active atmosphere. What does that mean? Of course, there's a geologist in the front row who's going to correct me. We'll just say it's less active by far than the Earth. That means anything that impacted the moon a billion years ago is right where it was a billion years ago. So the question is, what else can we discover? From 1969 up until 2008, 39 years, we believed the moon was bone dry. And then because of discoveries in 2008 and 2009, we now know there's hundreds of millions of tons of water ice on the moon. The question that we have to figure out is, what else is there that we don't know about? We know quite a bit, I should say a good bit, about the equatorial regions of the moon, because that's where our 6 Apollo missions landed with 12 humans. So we have a good bit of knowledge there. We really don't know what we don't know about the poles of the moon. And that's why it's important for us to go back.
Well, I think we're going to have to move on. This is probably going to bring on a part 2 of this program because there's just so much to talk about. And I hope that we can bring everybody back for another round of this at some point. So what I want to do now is just kick it to our last vignette with our intern, Sunny Panjwani, who's on his journey to find his place in space. And he's here to tell us a little bit about it.
Hi, I'm Sunny Panjwani. I work as a flight controller for the Environmental and Thermal Operating Systems for the International Space Station here at Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. As an intern here at Johnson Space Center through the entirety of 2018, I was able to learn the importance of having a football field-sized space station that allows us to conduct important research, and I learned about all the things that we still need to know before we can go to the moon and then later to Mars. My system, the Environmental and Thermal Operating Systems, takes charge of making sure our astronauts or our crew members are safe in their environment, that they have enough oxygen to breathe, that their carbon dioxide is scrubbed, and that we can provide them as much clean, healthy water as possible. There's nothing quite like working at NASA. Here at Johnson Space Center, I get to come to work and work with people who are all here for a common goal, a common purpose, to find something new, to go and explore what has not been explored before, and to learn something new every single day. Every day when I come to work, I'm working with complex, challenging problems. Things that I may have explored in my STEM degree, and some things which I've never seen before. And that's the excitement that my work gives me. There's nothing else in the world that challenges you so much as working in an environment like this, in real-time operations for a space station that flies around our planet at 17,500 miles per hour every day, and it's been there for 20 years. So if this is something that you're interested in, dig in, do the work, and come find your place in space here at NASA.
Well, I want to thank all of you for attending today, being part of this event. I want to thank Tracy and Bill and Steve. Thank you for your leadership and your continued efforts to make sure that when we go to the moon this time, we're going to stay, to retire the risk and go on to Mars. There's a lot of exciting things happening. You guys had the opportunity to talk to the astronauts on the International Space Station. The International Space Station is just the beginning. What NASA has in the future is a very robust commercial marketplace in low Earth orbit. Again, where NASA is just one customer of many customers, and we have numerous providers that are competing on cost and innovation. We have already taken great steps towards achieving that with commercial resupply of the International Space Station. Very soon, we will be launching commercial crew to the International Space Station. In other words, NASA is not purchasing, owning, and operating the hardware. We're going to buy the service. Well, we want to buy the service for habitation in low Earth orbit as well. In other words, we're not going to purchase, own, and operate the next space station in low Earth orbit. We want a dozen different companies operating their own space stations for commercial activities in low Earth orbit, which means there's going to be more opportunity for more people to do more things in the space industry than ever before. But that's just low Earth orbit. At the same time, the question is, why are we so interested in commercialization? Because the President has given us a new direction, to go to the moon, and this time go to stay, to prove the technology, to retire the risk, to go with commercial partners, to go with international partners, to utilize the resources of the moon, and to prove that we can live and work on another world. It is a proving ground for an eventual mission to Mars, where we now see day by day we're making new discoveries about the probability of life. And that probability keeps going up. And no, I'm not saying life is there, because I know there's people out there that want to write articles about what the NASA administrator just said. All I'm saying is the probability just went up. And so the question is, as I mentioned earlier, we will have a human on the south pole of the moon in 2024. And I'm here to tell you, as the Vice President has declared, that we will have on that mission the first woman on the south pole of the moon. That is something for all people to be excited about. So that's a big thing. And I've talked to other college groups before, and the question is, what do I need to be that first woman on the south pole of the moon? To be clear, that woman probably already is at NASA. So you might not have that opportunity. It could be Tracy, for all that matter. It could be Christina, who we just saw on the International Space Station. But here's what's important to note. That's, again, the beginning. We are just at the beginning. NASA is 60 years old. We have a long way to go. The question is, who's going to be the first person on Mars? Those are opportunities in your future. And if the people on this panel continue to do the great work that they do, those will be opportunities that you get to participate in. And if you're not that person on Mars, you can be that engineer. You can be that scientist. You can be, as me, that economics, business, and psychology major that ultimately participates in these very exciting activities. So when it comes to this next generation that you're a part of, know this: the future is very bright. You have lots of opportunities. We want to engage you in those opportunities, and it's not all just at NASA. It's with our commercial partners, and maybe even with our international partners. There's more opportunity right now in space than ever before, and the opportunity is only just now starting to get a lot bigger, a lot faster. So thank you for participating in this very important, outreach opportunity to talk to young folks. And we'll look forward to doing it again in the very near future. So thank you so much.